actually a financial crime investigator, and my job is to solve financial crime for a living. And I absolutely love my job. It's every day is unique, every day is different, and I get to solve a financial puzzle literally every day I'm in the office. Having said that, yeah, some days are harder than the other because when you're solving a financial crime, you don't necessarily get all the answers on day one. So you kind of have to break your head a little bit. But it's great. It's absolutely great to experience the ups and downs of a pure investigation that you run through. And I think today, when of course in the last 1.5 years, most of our news has been revolved around the pandemic, and it's a very sad situation that we're all in. But I think a large portion of the news prior to that was also around financial scams that were happening not just in India but everywhere in the world, and it's also in a way a pandemic of its own. People have really abused the system, and there are a lot of financial frauds going around, and that's what gives rise to a good amount of work for people like me who want to investigate financial crime. So I'll just explain to you a little bit about my journey of where I started from and where I am today. So I entered this field around 10 years ago, and when I started off, I was given a very quote unquote small project to do, and it was a small club somewhere in Bombay where as usual the club had done some renovations inside, and some of the committee members had thought that people had overspent to kind of renovate the club, so they asked me as a financial investigator to come in. And I along with maybe a colleague or two were sitting in that club, and we used to review the expenses. And every time that we picked up a new item, or we went to visit around the club to see what was inserted for a small amount of money, we would actually come across or unearth a new sort of financial crime. It's like buying an article for 10 rupees, but then showing that you've actually bought it for 50 rupees and then claiming the additional 40 in your pocket. And it's that very same and subtle principle that it's layered so many times over, and that's where people like myself and other financial crime investigators get involved to solve these crimes. So it was really cool, and I found it very exhilarating because it's a combination of reviewing documents to seeing things in the physical environment and also interviewing people, and it's a really fun job to do. So that was 10 years ago when the total value of the fraud that I was probably investigating was not more than 50,000, but the amount of fun, the amount of learning that I got in that was tremendous. And now that I fast forward to 10 years, at the beginning of this year, even though travel was restricted, I got the opportunity to work in Mauritius to consult with the European Union to investigate the world's largest fraud at which was approximately, I think, $7.8 billion. And if you put in perspective, that's 50,000 crores. So I would say that from investigating a 50,000 rupee fraud 10 years ago to doing something of 50,000 crores today is definitely something that I'm really proud of. But what's really cool in all of this is whether the amount be 50,000 rupees or 50,000 crore rupees, the fundamental principle or the mind of a financial criminal actually works in a very similar manner. Yes, they all add their own unique touch and flavor to it, but it's amazing to see that scale is immaterial, but it's just a matter of putting in the hard work and finding something you love to do and then just pursuing it at the very best way you can. Because at the end of the day, if we just take out the scale of things, if you do anything to the best of your ability, the sky is always the limit. And at the end of the day, dream big, but don't hesitate to start small. And the last thing that I want to give you guys about the kind of work that I do, we also have a really cool and fun side to it as well. So since I work with a lot of law enforcement agencies, and in the over the last couple of years, I've been working a lot with global agencies, which are the equivalent of Interpol or International Police. Um, I get a chance to get deposed as an expert witness in many of these cases. And I don't know if you guys have seen any of these cool American TV shows where they get in an expert witness, and then you get to point and say that yes, it's that man over there that stole the money or whatever. So in fact, a couple of years ago, I had this lovely opportunity to be deposed at the US High Commission. where it was a meeting between me, the judge, and the FBI team, and I was called in as an expert witness. And although it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, I'm very sad to say that it's not how it appears to be on TV. It was just three of us in a conference room where we had a cup of coffee and they asked me two questions, and that was it. But it was still a really, really cool experience. And the world of financial crime is absolutely amazing. It's like solving a financial puzzle every day of your life, and it's something that I love to do. And I hope you guys would go back and research a little bit more about it, because it is definitely the need of the hour as we stand today, and it's something that is going to just grow tremendously in size over the period, and over the next decades or so, and especially with the current generation that's in the I believe that the youth of today has so much experience in terms of technology, in terms of applying themselves, that this sort of a field would be right up any one of your alleys, and you all would do tremendously well at it if you have like the love for this sort of things. If you guys have like TV shows like Money Heist and things like that, you would really love this sort of work. Yeah, don't expect it to be as glamorous, or as there's no background music that plays when you're investigating, so it's sometimes is a bit a bit mundane, but otherwise it's a really, really fun job to have.
You mentioned that you worked in Mauritius with the
Yeah.
European Union for like $7.8 billion. Can you tell us about that? That seems pretty exciting.
Globally, companies generally don't just operate in one region, right? They operate across. Like take Apple for an example, right? Apple, of course, based in the US, has offices all over the world. So we were investigating a company that was into some sort of payment software, and they had actually got businesses all over the world. And what they'd done is they had done certain frauds within Germany, and they had actually built up a huge asset book. Means that they had earned a lot of money over there. Another problem was they could not keep that money in Germany anymore. They needed to be able to utilize it. They have to kind of route it across the world and take it to, I don't know, places like you've heard, like the Cayman Islands or Cyprus or something like that. And generally, countries like Mauritius have an open policy to accept foreign investment, and therefore, it's a very sad fact, but places like these are sometimes used for these nefarious activities. So what happened was, this particular company had made a lot of money somewhere, and they wanted to shelve off this money or hive out this money. So they used Mauritius as a conduit, or what we call in our language a special purpose vehicle. You guys might have heard about these terms like SPVs. So they set up these special companies to route money out, and they show that they've actually bought some new company, which is probably just a box or a shell company, which they've bought for a high value, and then they kind of take the money out and route it to through various accounts. So in overall, just it was about in a very elaborate, in a very diluted sense, a money laundering case that I worked on.
What you do, of the difference between what you do and what SEBI does, as
Right.
SEBI as well, they monitor, regulate, and they regulate Indian capital and financial frauds in India,
Right.
etc. So I just want to know more about that.
Excellent question. So how it works is, SEBI is a pure regulator, right? So think of SEBI as having multiple departments in them. One is, of course, in terms of running the entire corporate India as such. Like, all companies have to file their returns with SEBI. SEBI has to audit them and work them. SEBI also has a department which deals with fraud. Now, the unfortunate part is that today frauds are extremely complex, right? When I would strongly recommend that you all watch this if you all have interest in it. There's a documentary about the Enron scam that took place. It's called The Smartest Guys in the Room, and it shows you step by step of how complicated a financial fraud is. Now, at SEBI's level, they are very well equipped to investigate fraud, and nothing to take away from their capabilities. But sometimes they're really overburdened with work, and they require consultants like myself to come and help them. So we work along with SEBI as well to investigate these financial crimes. And in fact, the EU arm that I was actually working with, so the European Union and the government of Mauritius, I was actually working alongside their corresponding regulators as well. So I was actually a special investigator for the regulators. So where we come in is we act as consultants to help these regulators investigate financial crime. So you're right to say that SEBI would be investigating, or SEBI or their equivalents everywhere, the SEC in the US or the FCA in the UK. All these bodies individually also investigate and are very capable of doing so. The only thing is, I guess, right now there is just so much of this in the world that each of these organizations is heavily burdened. And sometimes I think it makes more sense for them to hire an external expert or an external consultant to help them out with these. Actually, the whole idea about investigation, right, is the ability to keep an open mind that anything is possible. And anyone can investigate, to be honest. I know I'm kind of like eating into my own business here, but actually anyone can. You just have to have a curious mind and you'd be able to do anything. It's just about asking the right questions. And sometimes when we investigate, fact is really stranger than fiction, right? Some things that you'd be like, no, this is not possible. And then you kind of dig through the papers a bit more and you're like, wait, this is possible. And this is exactly what has happened. A good quality of an investigator is the ability to keep his or her mind open to any scenario or any possibility. Because the moment you as an investigator start writing out possibilities, I personally believe you may not necessarily give it due justice to the investigation.
Since your line of work in financial crime, when a lot of people hear the word crime, it has a sort of connotation that it's, on the edge and it's scary at times, it's unsafe. It's even working on the side of trying to solve crimes. It feels, when a lot of people, even me, when I hear the word crime, it feels like something that I don't want to dabble into. So, when working, do you ever feel this sort of like, I guess a kind of imposter syndrome, where you're like, I am in a place of work where, yes, I have qualifications, but I am in a field which is unsafe, which is known to be like on the edge of sorts. So do you ever feel that kind of way? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Very good question. So just to give you a little bit about myself, I really enjoy the thrill of things. So I love living on the edge as such. And I think most people as well, right? When we look at any of these current content that is being consumed is always around crime and thrill, right? If there's a thrill to what you're doing, you'd love it. Now, coming back to my kind of work and getting involved into the investigation of crime, I think in a way that gives me a certain high, which I really, really enjoy and I love. And that's the passion that comes out in it. The second part about the dangers to it, there are no doubt. Here, the danger is not so much in terms of physical well-being, right? Most white-collar criminals aren't those kind of people who would probably send 3 quote-unquote goons to your office to say that don't investigate this. Here, the risk is slightly different. They will go after what I as an investigator value the most. That is my reputation. People will start targeting you in certain ways to make sure that your reputation can take some damage. And like as an investigator, we have to stand very firm and very tall. And it is hard, no doubt. It's very hard sometimes because you face a lot of heat from various elements. But I think overall, and it's a very simple call. I think if you're in the right, eventually nothing will happen to you. So there is definitely an element of risk, but I think it's part and parcel of every job that's there, and we don't need to worry too much about the risk, because trust me, once you start doing the kind of work that we do, you'll see that it's so entertaining, it's so intriguing that you just want to do it again and again, and the actual because here the measurement as such is technically a victory in terms of finding the culprit or finding whoever did or giving justice to someone else, right? And I don't think that can be compared with any of the other things that you go through the investigation. So although the point is very well noted that there are a lot of risks, we are on the edge most of the time, but I think the eventual result or the goal, once you achieve it, just makes everything seem worthwhile.
When you go into an organization, if people have heard of you before, knowing that you are an investigator, they would obviously try to cover up or avoid you as much as possible.
Right.
And they would also set their guard up. So how does it work when you're in a sort of incognito mode, or like, you've been called in by, say, the owner of the business or the,
Right.
company, but they want to keep the fact that there's an investigation going on under wraps. So how does that whole process?
What happens is over time, people know that me or my team is in this world of corporate crime, and whenever someone sees us in an organization, their antennas go up saying that yes, if this person is here, there could be something that they're investigating or doing wrong. So there's two ways we combat this, right? The first way is we actually don't infiltrate an organization until we have some evidence at hand. So what we do is we call it the covert phase of the investigation, where the entire investigation is actually done offsite, where we don't need to necessarily go into the office and get the records. But yeah, sometimes there are cases where what happens is there is no choice but to go physically, right? Into an environment and see how things are. So in those cases, what we do is we use what are known as feeder firms, right? So there are other. So I'm a chartered accountant myself, and this is how I've got into this profession. What we do is we have affiliate or sister firms that we use, right? And we send people from those firms. So they just go on the pretext of either a routine audit or a routine tax engagement, and they get the information from those places to us. And that's how we kind of combat the that part of the investigation where it would be little, we would be probably gambling with giving out our identity beforehand to lose out on a certain type of result. So that's how we kind of do it. In other cases, like for example, when I'm consulting with governments or law enforcement, uh, you can get a little bit drunk on the power that you get, because there you have the authority to ask for anything upfront and someone has to give it to you. But in a corporate investigation, we have to be very tactful, like you said. A concern that you raised, that if there's something going wrong, you don't want the organization also to have that sort of a an environment where people are like, oh, someone is watching you or someone is investigating you. So we do it in a covert manner. And trust me, now, especially in this pandemic, we've been doing investigations completely offline. So it actually is kind of now evolved to that, where most investigations are done purely covertly, and then eventually we just, in the last leg of the investigation, we go and interview or meet with the people concerned.
One is maybe not the largest, fraud that you looked into. What was the most interesting one, without naming anything, stepping on anybody's toes? Which, like, one did you find the most baffling? Like, I can't believe they did something like this. And two is for young kids like this, if you can give them some advice on to make sure that they don't encounter such hurdles, like maybe 2-3 rules that they can follow in future when they join a company or try to start their own company, something
Right.
that can help them.
Sure. So in terms of the most intriguing case that I've worked on is actually an insurance claim, an insurance case where someone had died in the UK. Someone had taken a policy in the UK, then had moved to Sri Lanka had gone to Sri Lanka for a holiday. Unfortunately, passed away in Sri Lanka. And what happens in a scenario like this is, globally, insurance companies, when a death happens in a quote unquote third world country where everything isn't necessarily digitized or whatever, it's flagged off for investigation. So it was a routine thing that was flagged off for us, and we were told to investigate. The long and short of it is, we actually found that lady alive, and it turned out to be a much larger insurance scam where people would fake their own deaths in Sri Lanka, claim a huge policy in the UK, and split the profits with a cartel. So it was actually pretty cool. So that was, I think, the most intriguing thing. And all of this was eventually found out through the financial documents that were available regarding the case. And eventually, when we went to Sri Lanka for a site visit, we actually found that lady, I mean, alive and well. Good that she was alive, but bad that she was part of the car. And then it turned out it was a much, much bigger thing. Like, there was an entire cartel that actually said that this is how we operate, that we will take 50% from the eventual policy value and give 50% back to this person to live under a new identity. So let's say if any of these people are entrepreneurial or start their own business and want to do something, my first or the golden rule that I would always say is that for any sort of expenditure that is incurred, right, to one is to preserve the documentation behind that expenditure, right? Because you never know when in the future, because when you're running an organization, you try to, of course, manage and control as much as possible, but unfortunately there comes a time where you have to give in control to someone else to kind of run the day-to-day operation. So one thing is to have absolutely correct and well recorded documentation, which would include any sort of expenses. And I personally believe the second thing that I would recommend is at least once in a quarter, everyone should just sit along with the team just to gauge on where they stand, like in terms of their goals or where they are. Because one of see, whenever there are many reasons why frauds take place, right? And one of the reasons of fraud taking place is not necessarily greed in itself. It's also sometimes in an organization, someone feels that they have not got promoted, so they believe it's their right to, take something back from an organization. And there are various elements apart from greed. So I believe that once a quarter or once in 6 months, if you're able to sit with the team and address people's concern and keep a good morale, that itself is a way to reduce fraud. It's like having a healthy mindset versus being unhealthy, right? So that itself, a healthy mindset will automatically mean good health. So I think that's the second thing. And the third thing is, even though frauds that take place are sometimes not necessarily again greed driven but opportunity driven. I mean, if there is a mistake in the system, it's not someone who would want to do the fraud, but eventually they see at some point that, okay, this particular mistake hasn't gone unnoticed, then that's an opportunity for them. So at least once a year to rework and reevaluate the entire, what we call as the internal control environment, which is effectively the financial backbone of any organization. To at least once a year just revisit it to kind of find the chinks in the armor and evaluate that, okay, are there any processes or any systems that are not working in the way they should be working. So I think these three are the most critical that I see, like keeping everything documented correctly, having these routine meetings amongst the teams to basically identify that everyone is in a good space, and third is to check whether within an organization all the systems that they have put in place, let's say record expenses, to book incomes, or just in general to maintain a good management information system, those are working. I think if these three are there, there should be your risk for fraud would reduce tremendously.
As a education thing, what did you need to study to do this? Just basic chartered accountancy, or is the special additional training to do something like this?
So for like while I was going through the process, at that time it was more than enough to just be a chartered accountant or basically have any sort of finance degree. I think over the years now there are a lot of courses available. A lot of universities are offering now forensic studies as a course as well. So that could be a potential career path that someone could choose to come into the line that I'm in. But from where I stand, anyone with a good finance degree is good enough. And in fact, I think of late a lot of technology people are also getting into our space, and the financial fraud, along with the cyber security or cyber fraud, as they say, are converging into one. So I need to kind of have some knowledge of cyber security as well as vice versa, and this is becoming the new trend. So either you can go through the IT route or you can go through the finance route, but both would lead to this path of investigation, and that should be good enough.